start by a little segue. If Maria Ressa was here, she's our CEO and she's our boss, you know, and she's actually only, I mean, she looks like a kid, right? But she's actually about, I think, I don't want to reveal her age, maybe I shouldn't. She's above 40, let's just say that. And if Maria Ressa were here, she would start talking about how journalism has evolved since she began as a young journalist, and she's been around. So she has actually worked for CNN, she has worked for smaller companies, news companies here, and she's headed one of the largest news companies in the Philippines, ABS-CBN. And I've known her for a while back, and I feel like, I guess, you know, she always talks about how journalism, we always have to talk about who we are and where we come from so we understand our biases. And, you know, and even in journalism, we still have our own biases. So I guess I should talk a bit about, briefly, about where I come from and my biases. I feel like I've straddled both the tech world and the non-tech world in the sense that I grew up in a media field. I rarely talk about this because it's not something I don't want to brag about, but I was actually a part of a children's television show. I know, thank you. It's not really obvious, yes. No, not Batibot, but I really would have loved to be a part of Batibot. It was called Five and Up, and it was a children's show. Oh, okay, thank you. I'm not that old. It was a children's show where we explored topics relevant to children, not told to children, but speaking from a child's point of view to another child. And we explored topics as esoteric as how to make a hot dog, to how, you know, why do children engage in smoking and drinking. But that was later on. So guess what story I got? The how to make a hot dog story. But yeah, and it was for us, it was different. Well, it was work, but it was fun because we got to explore different aspects of the Philippines. We got to go and travel. We even got to travel abroad. And for us, it was just telling a story to our fellow, you know, at the time, our fellow students or classmates. We didn't really think that we were actually in the media industry. But the reason why I say that is because even at a young age, I was exposed to how media works. And back then, it was all analog. If you wanted to edit a story, you would have to use, you know, rows and rows of tapes. I'm sure some of the journalists here know about that. You'd have to edit it manually, cut and splice, and all of that. Now it's digital. You can do it on your laptop. Anyone can do it. And so I've seen the changes. And in terms of the social media world, I have to admit, prior to joining Rappler, I didn't really use my Twitter account. I didn't really believe in talking about what I ate today and where I'm going later in 5 minutes, and whether I arrived there late or not. You know, I didn't believe in the hype of social media. I thought it was all just a lot of, you know, maybe self-promotion. And so when I joined Rappler, I was very skeptical because I had done media work for about 2 years in a normal, traditional news company. And I was a bit jaded, honestly, because I thought, you know, media is just media. It produces information that the consumers want, and, you know, most often than not, we produce the information that we think the consumers want, and we think we need to do it in a certain way. We need to sensationalize it, we need to make it sexy, we need to make it adventurous and active, otherwise it's boring, right? And so when we did that, or when I was part of that, I felt that would be my life if I joined. And it was very comfortable, actually. You could sit in an air-conditioned desk for the whole day, just watch TV, and to others it seemed glamorous. Myself, I wasn't really that interested. When I joined Rappler again, after dabbling in other things, I was skeptical and I thought, what can we actually do differently? What can we do differently that isn't being done now? And when it was explained to me that this is what Rappler is doing, I was still skeptical and I thought, well, you know, this is Facebook, this is Twitter. What can you do with Facebook and Twitter, honestly? Like, I check my Facebook account to pass the time. I don't check it to change the world. That's not my immediate objective when I look at Facebook. I look at Twitter to kind of, you know, see what other people are doing, not exactly to update myself on the news. That was my attitude coming in. And a year later, I'm still a bit skeptical, but not in the same way. I'm more skeptical about the people who only view the same things that I viewed Rappler, Facebook, Twitter, and all of these social media networks a year ago. I'm skeptical that people won't change their views of the world the way we see it, just because of this medium. Why? It's because we're so used to information being fed to us that we rarely nowadays want to, you know, take the time to get the information where we want to get it. We're so used to sitting down and just passively watching the world pass us by that we rarely really take the time out to figure out what exactly we want to get out of it. So now, I guess the way that I'm introducing myself is to show you that even after a year, things don't change magically. It's not going to be a winter wonderland for social media by 2014. But definitely, what I found at least is that the potential is there, the power is there, and really, again, it's cliche, but the power is in your hands. So in Rappler, we started off on Facebook. When they started out Rappler, it actually started as Move PH. But they were thinking, the traditional journalists who started Rappler thought, you can't really name a news company Move PH. It's like you're a moving company, You might mistake you for a moving company. So, and you can't start it on Facebook. Or at least they thought they would start it on Facebook, but then they realized it's bigger than Facebook. It's bigger than just putting up a website on Facebook. So they decided to name it Rappler. But now, even on Rappler, even if Rappler is now a news company, in the traditional sense that we gather the news and report it, we still have our roots, which is Move PH, and that's what I head right now. Move PH is a civic engagement arm of Rappler. Some say it's a citizen journalism arm of Rappler, where we deliberately say that, okay, we're here to gather the news, we're here to report the news, but at the same time, we're also hybrid journalists in that we are not just gathering the news, we're helping people who are making news, people who need to make the news but can't or don't really know how. We're helping you amplify the message that you already have, the great stories that you already have. Amplify that, put it online on social media, and get it out there. Not that you can't do it alone, but that we all need to help each other out, especially when it comes to the core issues that Move does cover. For example, we have education, gender, governance, and then health. And even under governance, we kind of nuance it. So right now we have a partnership with the Open Budget Partnership on budget, on the Philippine budget. We also have a partnership, which Voltaire will explain later, with our Climate Change Commission and their Office of Civil Defense on covering disasters, not just covering it, but being prepared for it, climate change adaptation and mitigation. And we have a partnership with the DSWD, or the Department of Social Welfare and Development, and the World Food Program on hunger. So these core issues that Rappler follows, that Move PH follows, is what drives us to produce content, to look for partners, civil society groups, even government. We're not afraid to partner with government. We've actually crossed that line. So in the past, journalists would never touch any government agency or official with a 10-foot pole. Why? Because you're not supposed to. Journalism is supposed to be objective and independent. But we're still objective and independent. We're not just going to feed, the people anything that the government wants us to feed. But we feel that there are ways that there are avenues and opportunities that we can actually work with government and the private sector and civil society to get the message across, especially if it's a message that cuts across, all sectors of society and affects everybody. Like, for example, a disaster. So, without much further ado, and I'm sure you're all dying to know what is it exactly that Rappler does, I'd like to introduce Voltaire Tupas, my colleague. Now, Voltaire is also a hybrid, in that he used to work in the NGO world. He used to be the executive director of an NGO that worked with indigenous people, or IPs. And when he was first attracted to Rappler, he was attracted to Rappler via Twitter. He had a Twitter account. He used a pseudonym, and he would comment on various issues using this, pseudonym Twitter account. And people just found him really funny and followed him. And one time he was invited by the Rappler bosses who hadn't formed Rappler yet. He was invited to come and meet them. And he was quite nervous because here he was, just a commenter online, meeting the big boss of ABS-CBN News at that time. And one thing led to another, and once Rappler was formed, he was one of the first people who was asked to be a part of it. At first, just to be a commenter, just to give his thoughts and opinions. Eventually, he became one of the first people leading Move PH. And today, after so many things and so many stories to tell, he's with us today. He's going to talk about his experiences as a budding journalist.
Good afternoon. This is the second time I'm speaking in front of a public. I usually tremble in front of a crowd. That's why I was just hiding behind a pseudonym when I was stalking my boss now. And she invited me over coffee because there's such a thing as tweet ups on Twitter. You meet up with your Twitter friends. So she was my twin at that time. So we met up over coffee. And then she asked me to join at the time the TV, and I said, oh no. I'm from the province. I'm Bisaya. My accent is a bit heavy, so I said I'm just okay behind the scenes. But then after 9 months, I decided to join Move PH at that time. Move PH, which was coined by my colleague Patricia Evangelista. She's here. And then we started the small. It was an experiment on Facebook. And then, so from Twitter and Facebook, and now I'm not necessarily a journalist. I call myself a journalist, a change-oriented journalist. So I'm more of an activist because I came from the Cordilleras, the mountainous part of the Philippines. I was more of a revolutionary there, and I was tweeting in Sagada, and then. So I was talking them, and then and so I'm here now. So fast forward, I came from Leyte. I just came from Leyte actually. Is it okay now? So I'm doing work at Move PH. I write just like any other Rappler. We also do organizing work. We try to meet a lot of students, young people around the country because at the end of the day, it's not just online connection that is important. What's more important is your relationships with the people on the ground. And you can separate your online and your offline lives because they're one. So we do groundwork to link up our online platforms and to also to promote what we do. Okay. Let me see. That's really techy. Yeah. This is not my computer. Sorry, I think that's that. So I just came from Leyte. So I just came from Leyte. I was trying to look for my family because we lost connection for about a week. Well, the government did not have the communication backbone also. So I was really worried when I saw the footages of the cathedral, which was newly renovated, the cathedral in Palo, Leyte. It crumbled, and I used to hear mass there because I was a seminarian in that town. And then, so I was really afraid because if that cathedral was so weak to withstand the typhoon, how much more our house? It was in a town away from Palo, Leyte. Um, and then when I arrived in Tacloban, I just saw rubble and piles of the ruins there. It was just so shocking. I could not recognize the airport, and then the people were just. It was so devastating. I was so speechless. I really stare at people because you see hopelessness, desperation, um, and then you smell the stench of death. A few meters away from the airport, and I understand, as Patricia would tell you perhaps later, until now there are still a lot of people, a lot of bodies, dead bodies. They're still everywhere in the global. So it was just so devastating to see the entry point to our province. So I was really scared because I didn't know what was happening to my family, what happened to my family. So I searched around Tacloban looking for contacts because I could not go to our town looking for people until I found one. And then we couldn't go because it was not safe. People were really angry. You can feel the state of lawlessness at that time. People will just grab you or they were asking for water and food and bang the door of your car, etc. So I was able to find them the next day. But I met this woman. Maybe we can. Yeah. Well, I was because I didn't have the transportation to go to our town, so I just went around, and this woman was really pestering everyone, all media reporters there, but they were all busy, and she was like insane at that time. So people were afraid of her, but then I decided to talk to her, and then she just wanted to deliver a message through us, just to tell her daughter that she's alive. She wrote a piece on a piece of paper, her name, the number, and then her daughter. And I interviewed her, and she didn't want to leave. Unlike the people behind her, people were really scrambling for seats. They wanted to ride, to take the C-130 flights there, and but she decided to leave, not to stay, because her relatives, the people in her community, a few meters away, perhaps a kilometer away from the airport, were sick. They needed doctors. Um, Dead bodies were hanging on trees, etc. So, and then I lost contact. I got disconnected from the world, and then I knew after I was informed after that her daughter was able to read the article, and because she was looking for any sign of any indication that her mother was alive. YouTube, newspapers, newspaper clips, other sites she visited just to look for her mother, the person finder, which we'll be talking about later. Um, Basically, that's the power of social media, at least in the Philippines in time of disaster. Even if there was a communication breakdown because of the extent, the magnitude of the typhoon, there's always a way to bridge um, information, to relay information to people who are in need. In fact, social media in times of disaster bridges despair and hope. Um, just like the case of Daisy. And more importantly, during disaster, social media can in fact bridge disaster response and recovery. That's what I'm going to talk about. It's okay now. Landa, we thought about Agos. It means flow. Actually, I was just beating a deadline, and I couldn't think of a word, so I was talking with Zach, as we call it Agos. It means flow, and but it's supposed to be a multi-hazard platform. It does not only address typhoons or floods. It tries to um, yeah, it tries to capture the stages of disaster, from preparedness to response phase to recovery phase. So it has been launched last week. Um, it gives you important risk knowledge and information under prepare to help decision makers, responders on the ground, and the people, the community, to prepare during disaster. I mean before disaster, to build their capacity to withstand typhoons. So it's an information portal. And at the same time, so you will find stories there, also tips on how to to prepare, and more importantly, it equips the decision makers on the ground on how to plan. For instance, the climate change action plans, their development plans relative to disasters, etc. So it consists of maps geohazard maps. But they are not only maps which were generated by the government, but there are also crowdsourced maps. Here, the importance of the participation of the netizens should be highlighted because the government it takes time for them to update their maps before they can do rapid assessment. For instance, to address a crisis, it will take days. So, well, I just came from a meeting yesterday with the OCD, the Office of Civil Defense, which is the Secretariat of the Disaster Council in the Philippines. They are trying to come up with an information platform days after Yolanda came. So they realized they need an information infrastructure to help them prepare. So they are doing that now, and they are using our platform to getting information from our platform. It's okay now. So that's the preparedness side. And then the response phase. The response phase, what is this? This is a crisis tracker. So this, I think this is crowdsourced. What you can see there is a map. Plotted on the map are keywords which are relevant to the Yolanda crisis. For instance, you type in Tacloban, and then those data and information would appear, and they are important to planners because if you need information, that can help you find the important stuff you want in making decisions, in deploying help. And then during response phase, we have tied up with various stakeholders like the national agencies, the Philippine National Police, the military, and is that one? No. Okay. And the local government units, which are crucial during the response phase. And more importantly, with bloggers and the netizens. Agos specifically curates, gathers information from social media, Facebook, Twitter. It scans information, it scans the terrain, the social media terrain, and makes sense of the information because there's so much noise in the internet during disaster. The good thing is, Filipinos are very active during disaster. In fact, before they evacuate, they tweet what they do, what they eat, and also to inform their families that they are okay, and also to extend help. But the problem is, especially if you want to map information, because it's not in our culture, in our psychology to geotag ourselves where we are to protect our privacy, or perhaps we just don't know how to tinker with the geotagging feature. So there's a lot of noise, you can't locate the information, but there's so much information online which you can use to save lives. That's what we are doing. We either do rage and seek scan, or through our volunteers, we manually sift through data and information available on the internet, and try to look for relevant information which a critical need, which indicates that there's a critical need like rescue, relief, and other forms of response. Is that the one? Okay. Okay. Okay, fast forward na lang. And then the last phase would be the recovery phase. The recovery phase is very important because it completes the cycle of the process. Can you? Yeah, that's the family I saved. The airport there. What I saw in the airport. Okay, forward. You see, they just wanted to go anywhere. The dead body still. Yeah, this is important. I think after we can stop. Okay, before. Yeah, from there. So the last phase would that is the recovery phase, which the Philippines is now. I mean, Tacloban is now undertaking the rehabilitation and reconstruction of the city and the province. So that's the platform. Now the challenge is, aside from that, is to tell the stories of the people who are affected. This is usually what we read, basic information about the Philippines. There are 18 major river systems in the country. 70% of the Filipinos live in coastal areas. 9 of 10 disasters globally are climate related, and there are more intense typhoons and higher sea levels expected in the next 20 years, according to a World Bank study. This information was available even before Yolanda. It did not just reach many of the communities and many other the victims, the vulnerable sectors. That's the sad part, because through internet you can access this data and information available to us. But as journalists and as citizen journalists, the challenge actually is to give face to these figures, because they don't matter until you see their plight, you feel their vulnerability, their pain, and their struggles. In the age of social media, this is how we give face to disaster. I was talking about this earlier. We have memes. We post on Facebook, and that's Filipinos are actually few weeks in Leyte. So we can only highlight the importance of building their capacity even before disaster to strengthen the necessary infrastructure for them to withstand disasters. And also capture the breadth of the impact in terms of the devastation, the damage, etc. And social media is very important because real time we can communicate. As I said earlier, before government can complete its rapid assessment, the people are already reporting. In Bohol, for instance, when there was communication breakdown after the earthquake in Bohol, for 5 days, I was covering the disaster. They did not have the figures, the information. They could not deploy logistical requirements to deliver relief goods, etc., because they did not have information. But there was information in the air, in the internet. People were tweeting which roads were destroyed. Citizen journalists were reporting the needs, where to bring food, etc. But the government wasn't able to, they were at a loss on how to use the information. So that's where citizen journalists come in, to make sense of the information out there and help decision makers act accordingly. What's this? Okay. Speaking of which, this was one of our first crowdsourced videos. Can we play this? We can play this. We can play this. How can we play that? Why is it not moving? Okay. Anyway, one of our crowdsourced video, that was the Dumaguete crisis. Yeah. Okay. that was crowdsourced um, before Dumaguete third victim. Oh, it's working now. Here, can I just use this? No, that's I think it's ready. Dumaguete, third victim. Uh, uh, third victim. Yeah, sentence third victim. Yeah. This was the flood which um, devastated parts of Dumaguete when Typhoon Sendong about 2 years ago struck, affecting um, the southern part of the country, but also the central part. This was captured by a citizen journalist, not by a mainstream reporter media, but by a citizen who knew how to shoot and use his equipment and posted it on YouTube. It became viral after. It only shows that in the time of social media, you don't have to wait for mainstream media to visit your community and capture your moment. You are there. Why not capture it yourself and post it? You are empowered to do that because you have the equipment. So you have your smartphones anyway. Um, the electricity does not um, shut off before a few hours after the disaster, unlike Milanda. So you can post pictures and videos that will help inform the public. He posted the video because he thought Dumaguete was being neglected. At the time, the relief goods, the help was going to Mindanao. So he posted it and it became viral. It was captured by a citizen journalist, not by media. Because even before media people arrived, the disaster is already unfolding. So you can just document it and share it. So that's the citizen journalist. And can you, finally, that one, if it's possible, yeah. I think you have that. Yeah, that, yeah. And so Agos, basically that's by Project Agos. It's a combination of top-down government action combined with community involvement through crowdsourcing. And through our collective efforts, we can in fact save lives and protect our properties and in fact help people withstand disasters and adapt to climate change. So that's one of the important features of Agos and in general, of course, the value of using social media for social good. So I think that's it. We can just elaborate later during the open forum on how it works and how citizen journalists can maximize the platform. Thank you for your time.
Speaker, and she just came back from Tacloban. I have to warn you, the things we saw in Tacloban, of course, are very, very difficult, even to just explain in words. But Patricia's has this uncanny ability to capture words and not only tell it really well, by the way, sorry, in text form, but also in video form. And so she's going to talk to us today about her experience as a multimedia reporter and a journalist, and what she saw in Tacloban. Patricia?
Hi guys. A little more feeling here. Hi. There we go. Okay. As Zachary said, journalists have biases, and it's very important for us to be able to tell you what our biases are, so that you know where we stand and you can decide whether or not you believe us or trust us. I'd like to make one disclaimer. Nothing I say represents Rappler. The language I use may not necessarily be approved by Rappler, but Rappler is well aware I'm a loose cannon, so I think we can decide later on if you believe me or not. So I'll tell you what my biases are. I support the public dissemination of contraception. I support the legalization of divorce. By the way, the Philippines is the only country in the world that has not legalized divorce. I support gay marriage. I support the legalization of marijuana. I support a number of things that Rappler does not support. However, I'm here not to tell you where I stand. I'm here to tell you about other people and where they stand. I'm told I'm supposed to tell you why I tell stories. Does anyone know why they tell stories? No? Yes? We tell stories to make sense of the world. The who, the what, the where, the why, all of that, all the basics. But really, journalists are there to process things for you, to see things so that you know what's happening. You make sense of the world, so to speak. If you look at something, you see the interacting lines, you see the narrative arcs, you see why this happened, why this man got killed, who corrupted this president, that sort of thing. But the world isn't as easy as that, because things don't really make sense. A lot of events, a lot of things, a lot of people die, even if they're not supposed to. I'm a conflict, human rights, and disaster reporter, which doesn't really show the way I dress, but I just came back from Tacloban, so humor me. There are many things that don't make sense, and we like to think that as journalists, we make sense of things, so we decide what the moral lesson is somewhere out there. Maybe it's not supposed to happen anymore. Maybe people shouldn't die, that sort of thing. Does anyone know what sort of country this is? This is disaster central. This is where the Ring of Fire is. This is where there's a typhoon every December and every August. And everywhere in this country, we're ready. The statistics are this. In 2009, 464 people died in a typhoon called Ketsana. In the Philippines, we call that Ondoy. In 2011, 1,268 died in a typhoon called Washi. The national name is what? Sendong. In 2012, we had another typhoon named what? Bofa. How many died in Bofa? No? 1,146. About 3 weeks ago, there was another typhoon named what? Haiyan. We call the typhoon Yolanda. How many people died? The death count right now is 5,632. And counting. Because 3 days ago, my photographer and I, Carlo, who's over there, we're still shooting dead bodies in the street. But why do we tell these stories? Why does it matter? Someone once said that one death is a tragedy. But 1,000? What is it? It's mostly a statistic. You don't see 1,000 dead. You don't feel 1,000 dead. You don't know that they had lives, they have names, they have families. They thought today they would be alive. Every one of that 5,632 people thought they would be alive today. So why do we tell stories? Is it to make sense of the world? The world doesn't make sense. People die, even if they're not supposed to. Nobody was supposed to be dead in this typhoon. The government said only 2,000 died. Maybe 2,005. Maybe a little bit more. Every day it's maybe a little bit more. The reason we tell stories is for people to imagine, to will be able to see that 5,632 and say every single one of them was a father, was a mother, was a husband, a wife, a child. CNN came here, told the story. Suddenly the world gave a flying fuck. But that's the thing. Sorry. But that's the thing. Journalists, it doesn't matter if it's broadcast, it doesn't matter if it's online, it doesn't matter what it is. We tell the story so that it doesn't happen again. I'll tell you how it was in Typhoon Yolanda. It's a place called Tacloban City, at the center of Leyte. And when you walk in, you hear people start telling their stories immediately. You don't have to ask the questions, they'll tell you. They'll tell you, for example, that when they went out of the house the next morning, there were bodies leaning against refrigerators. There were bodies found in bedrooms, in bathrooms, in living rooms, in bathtubs. When you go down the road, and we came day 5, you see bodies wrapped in rainbow bright bed sheets. You see bodies every which way. And you think, what's the logic here? Where's the narrative arc? What's the moral lesson here? There's none. It doesn't make sense. Tacloban City is a city where people trade diesel for cars, where old women lie at night with butcher knives beside their beds because they're afraid they're going to be looted at night. And they're afraid the shit they looted, someone else will loot from them. It's a place where generals had to lift the bodies of their soldiers to get them out of the airport tarmac so that a C-130 could fly in and bring food and clothing and everything else. That was a city called Tacloban. And it's everywhere. Tacloban, Tanawan, Giwan, Palo. All these places, the stories didn't matter. The statistics did. But I'll tell you why they matter. I'll tell you a story. The last story we shot in Giwan. Or was it Giwan? Tacloban. The Astrodome in Tacloban. We were there at the swearing-in of the new village chiefs. And they sang the national anthem. And this is a place where 300 people died during the storm. And when you hear the national anthem, you close your eyes, you feel that 3,000 people are singing. And then one man, we were told, had lost his wife during the storm. That's a normal story for Tacloban. They'll tell you, I'm lucky because I only lost 2 children. I'm lucky, I only lost my wife. I'm lucky because I'm alive. But I want to die every night because I wasn't able to save them. I'll tell you about Dodong. Dodong is the barangay captain of Barangay 32. Or is it 52?
31.
31. Barangay captain of Barangay 31. So many stories there, I can't keep them straight in my head. Actually, I'm not very sober right now. I mean, I'm not drunk, but I'm not hinged properly. But he was the barangay captain of Barangay 31. What he did was that he carted a lot of his evacuees, a lot of his villagers, all 2,000 of them, to different evacuation centers across the city. And then that night he went home. It was his birthday the next day. He went home, he told his wife, it's our turn, let's get out. His wife said, I don't think it's a problem. This is his wife of 30 years. They fell in love, got married, and he doesn't think she's very pretty, but he thought she was a nice girl. She was also 20 years older than him, so he thought he was hot stuff. But on that night, the storm came. There were storm surges, things the Philippines don't see. The waves came, 1, 2, 3. They ran out of the house. His son, his 3-year-old grandchild, and the rest of the neighbors all ran to the next house. He said, no, get out of the houses because the waves are going to come. They went in anyway. So the water kept creeping up, 1, 2, 3. And then they were on the 2nd floor. And then the roof was blowing, and the house was moving. And there was no way out because the windows had grills. So what he did, this tiny little man, jumped on the bed, took a piece of metal, and struck the ceiling again and again. They ripped the ceiling open, and then there was a roof. So he had to go up higher and then rip the roof off. He got up, he saw the light, went out, got all 20 people out, and then he said, what are we going to do? They saw one standing building. It was a sea, rushing water, everything. So they were on top. He saw a balcony. He said, I'm going to jump. Hold on to my wife, make sure she's okay, and then when I jump, throw her in after me. He jumped, then he fell. And then he was underwater, and he could see nothing. And there was plywood over his head, broken roofs, everything. So he pushed, but he couldn't get out. So what he did, he put his hands together, and then pushed up, straight up, and he got free. Then he got on the other roof again, flew to the balcony, managed to get on top, turns around and says, give me my wife. and she was gone. And he started screaming, I told you to save my wife. And nobody could tell him. All they said was she was gone. So what he did, he got all 18 people out up to the balcony with him. And then the water receded, just like that. And then he saw his wife under the plywood, 1.5 meters below him. And she was under the plywood, and he was sad because his wife was dead. So he goes down, rips the plywood off, picks up the body, carries her to one of the only standing buildings, lays her down, wraps her in a sheet, puts her on a sheet of plywood, and lays down next to her and sleeps with her for 2 days because there's no one to pick up the bodies. Can you imagine that? Can you imagine the man who loves his wife lying beside a sheet of plywood and saying, at least I took care of her? And when we left, he read us his diary. We couldn't understand what but we could understand some of the words. I hate you, Yolanda. Again and again. And I kept saying it. I'm sorry, I'm sorry, I'm sorry I couldn't save you. His wife was one of 5,632. And when we forget that there is a name, there is a face, there is an age, there is a dream, there is a belief they'll be alive today, that's the day it doesn't matter why we tell stories. There's a place in Tacloban called Village 88. Most of the dead in Tacloban died, fathers and sons, because they refused to leave their homes. They would send their families to evacuation centers, and then they would stay because they were afraid of getting looted. So most of the dead are fathers and our sons, that sort of thing. But there's a place called Village 88. When you walk down the road, someone will go up to you and say, Ma'am, there's a dead body over there. Can you do something about that? Ma'am, there's a dead body over there. Can you do something about that? So we kept shooting the dead. We thought we had the responsibility. Of course, it's a little morbid. There are many stories you can tell about Yolanda, but you look for the dead. I look for the dead. I'm human rights and conflict and disaster. You think I don't look for the dead. But the reason I do it, and I figured it out the other day, because it was hell. We would shoot, we were standing in front of a growth of bamboo and mangroves. They said there's a body there. We were like, we don't see the body. We could smell it, but we couldn't see the body. She was the color of wood. She was hanging on the branches. Her legs had turned to wood. Her arms had turned to wood. You couldn't see her, but you knew she was there. And across the street was a house where a man named William Kabuki lived. And William had lost his wife in the storm. And the reason he wouldn't leave Timex Street in Village 88 is because he wanted to be there, just in case his wife came home. And every day he would see that body. For 18 days he saw that body. I don't know if it's still there. But I was there 3 days ago and she was still there. The reason we tell these stories is because we have a responsibility to bear witness. If we cannot look at the worst, what right do we have to tell people what happened? We push ourselves to see the very worst because we have no right. We're alive. It's an accident. We're alive because we got lucky. We're not good people. We don't do this to change the world. Rappler may. I don't. We do this because it shouldn't be happening. Because it could be my father. It could be my brother. And if I don't have the balls to stand there, who's going to stand there and say, this is what's happening now? I can tell you we weren't very brave. Carlo and I, we were throwing up all over the place. We'd shoot, throw up again, and then shoot again. And we would be going home crying every night. Carlo was walking around smoking, my cinematographer was getting drunk. And all of us, we said yes to come home. I've never been pulled out of a coverage, I never allowed it. But this time I said, take me home. I'll show you a video, it's called Village 88. It's what we shot very recently, it hasn't been released, and we have to edit it a little bit to make it publicly acceptable. But this is Village 88, there are subtitles in the bottom. You may have to stand up to see the subs. So we'll test it now. Can we kill the lights, please? Bolts, can you kill those? There's graphic content involved. I don't want you guys to feel you have to see it. So if you can't handle it, doors over there.
Lahat kami, taga-barangay iti, taga-fisherman village.
Squatter kami, marami kami doon. Di pa lang yung pagitan ng bahay ko sa dagat.
Yung iniintindi po namin, dahil marami talagang bagay dumarating din sa amin. Para bang wala lang.
Hindi kami lumikas kasi akala namin hangin lang.
Pizza 8 ng umaga, kasagsagan ng Yolanda, nasa bahay pa ako, pati yung misis ko.
Dahil mahirap talaga iwanan yung bahay, dahil maraming magnanakaw eh. Baka pagdating namin yung mga gamit namin, wala na. Biglang lumaki yung dagat, pati yung tubig, biglang lumaki yung alon, nagkagibaan yung mga bahay.
Nung pumasok na yung tubig, nagdesisyon na ako na magtakbuhan na kami. Subalit paglabas namin ng bahay, malaki na yung tubig.
Tapos yung mga kasamahan ko, pati yung mga maliliit, mawagsakan sa katawan ko.
Hanggang sa nakakapit kami sa isang bigkis na kawayan.
Nakakapit kami sa kawayan na tinali.
Mga 20 kami kumapit doon.
Yung mga bata talagang ginawa nila lang ng salpagina eh. Kunti na nahiningi ako. Kaya nabitawan ko yung mga bata.
Yung asawa ko po, hawak ko siya nung mga oras na yun na malakas ng hangin.
Hinawakan ko yung asawa ko po tsaka yung anak ko.
Paglingon ko, nakita ko yung miss ko, pero yung anak ko, wala na nabitawan ng miss ko.
Ginawa ko lahat yung magawa ko para iligtas ang asawa ko. Subalit, nagkahiwa-hiwalay kami nung nasa gitna na kami ng dagat.
Pagkapunta namin sa gitna ng dagat, nabundol kami ng bahay. Tapos yung asawa ko nakabitaw. Nagkaway po siya sa akin nung nakakapit pa sa kawayan. Isang bisis lang nagkaway. Tapos biglang lumubog. Hindi ko na po nakita.
Hindi ko nalaman na wala na siya.
Sabi niya sa akin, bumitiw ka na para malibre ka. Dahil hindi ko na kaya. Huwag, kahit na mangyari, sama-sama tayo. Wala na rin yung anak natin eh.
Tapos yung anak ko, hindi ko na nahawakan po kasi inano ng alon yung malakas na alon. Doon na nawala yung anak ko po
Masyadong madilim eh, yung asawa ko hindi na makakita eh. Hindi ko na talaga akalain na mabuhay pa kami.
Gusto ko sanang tumalon kaso pati ako mamamatay. Mataas na masyado
Mga 6 lang kami yung naligtas nung ipinagpad kami doon sa kabilang ibayo ng Tacloban.
Sabi ko sa miss ko, ligtas na tayo.
Tandaan po ako naglalakad pauwi, mga 4 na oras. Marami po mga katawan nga nagkalat, mga patay.
Hinanap ko na yung anak ko. Tapos yung asawa ko, hinanap ko rin.
Halos sinisa-isa po yung mga patay na nagpapakasakali na yun yung misis ko. Pero bigo po ako na makita siya.
Yung anak namin, kung saan namin nabitawan, pagkabukas ng maga, doon na namin nakita. Yung nakakita, yung uncle niya.
Ako po ang nakakita ng katawan nila. Ng anak ko sa asawa ko, pati yung pamangkin ko.
Tingin ko, nakaganon yung bata, nakaakap. Doon sa may damuhan. Wala na siyang buhay.
Lininisan sila, binihisan. Kahit basa yung mga damit, binihisan pa rin. Tapos linagyan namin ng yero para hindi maulanan. Hanggat na kinuha sila ng mga sundalo.
Kami po yung nagbalibag ng anak-anakan ni Ramela Navarro, pati yung asawa ni Eduardo.
Sabi ng asawa ko iyak ng iyak. Wala na kaming anak.
Mahirap talaga yung nawawalaan ng pamilya. Para ka nasisiraan ng bait. Nawawala ka sa sarili mo minsan. Minsan naman, bumabalik yung pag-iisip mo sa normal. Minsan, bumabalik na naman.
Hindi na ginagawa mga anak ko yung asawa ko. Pero sabi ko naman, andito pa naman din tayo eh. Saka yung Panginoon, hindi na magpapabaya siguro sa atin dahil binawasan na nga tayo ng isa eh. Magsikap na rin tayo.
Hindi ko pa makalimutan yung asawa ko. Na-imagine ko yung paano siya naghihirap ng kasagsagan ng bagyo. Halos naiyak pa rin ako hanggang sa ngayon kung naalala ko siya.
Paggabi po, nakaupo lang ako, tumitingin sa langit, kung saan yung liwanag.
Madilim po sa gabi sa Timix area. Nag-isa po ako lugar na yun. Pagkat yung mga anak ko, pinauwi ko na sa Biliran.
Mahirap na naman talaga mawala ng anak eh. Lalo na kung iisa lang. Kaya yung ano ko naman, kung saan siya nilagay ng Panginoon ngayon, sana si Lord na lang bahala sa kanya.
Gusto ko sana ako nauna kasi hindi man ginusto ng Panginoon. Ako itinira. Sabi ko ako na lang mauna dahil ako may sakit eh.
Gusto ko maglasing na lang gabi-gabi para makakatulog lang ako. Yung iba, wala nang gana na bumalik sa lugar na yun. Kasi wala nang bahay halos.
Hindi pa kami nakakabalik doon.
Ang buhay ko na napapaligiran ng mga patay, nung una, na parang may takot ako, hindi ako makatulog. Subalit, bandang huli po ay nakapag-adjust na po ako.
Yung pinagsisisihan ko po kung bakit hindi ko sila nailikas sa tubig. Kawawa naman yung mag-iina ko.
Ang isa sa mga dahilan kung bakit nanatili ako ng Timex, umaasa ko na babalik pa yung asawa ko.
Wala naman ang sisisi dahil puro pareho naman kami.
Village 88 is... Sorry, one moment. Village 88 is only one of many places in Tacloban. You saw Ramil, tall man. He was a butcher from Manila, fell in love with a girl, moved to Leyte, and decided that he could live happily ever after. He's a big man, he's a tall man, and when the storm happened, so many children clung to him, so many women clung to him because he was one of the few who could stand up and stay alive. What he did, he shook off the children, he shook off the women because he wanted to find his wife and daughter. You heard him, he found his wife, he didn't find his daughter. And when I asked him after, do your neighbors blame you? Because every one of the children who clung to him are dead now. Every one of the mothers and children who clung to him, gone. And he goes, no, nobody blames me. Because their parents are all dead too. That's a story of what happened to Tacloban. And it's a story that will keep happening again and again. Every day, a father will lose his mind. Every day, a daughter will lose her father because she's afraid. In her head, some of them still believe that they're missing. And then they realize maybe they are dead. So they wait at home and they look at the light. They hope they'll come home. And then maybe they don't and maybe they will, because sometimes they do. We tell stories to bear witness, to see them, and to make everyone else imagine how it was, so that help will come, so that maybe someday someone else won't die, so that maybe we're ready, so that maybe the government will pay attention, so that maybe the people who have seen this once will say the next time someone says evacuate, they will. Mostly, I tend to think that the worst part about being a journalist covering this sort of thing is not that you see the dead, or that you smell the dead, or that you see the worst. It's that people keep telling you their stories. You run out of battery, you're in the middle of nowhere, and people still want to tell you stories. And you can't tell all of them. You can't absorb all of them. And you feel at the end of the day, you don't have the skill, you don't have the craft, you don't have the ability to translate what you saw, what you heard, into something that everyone else can imagine. That for me was the hell we went through. That I could hear them. They would talk to me. But I didn't know if what I wrote, what I showed, what I said, did justice to the dead. Because they're gone. We stand for them for the only reason, not because we're journalists, because we saw it, because we talked to them, because they gave us the right to tell their stories. So the last reason why I think we tell stories is pretty personal to me. I tell stories because most of the time, I keep seeing them, I keep hearing them. I tell stories because I can't forget. And I tell stories most of the time because I'm afraid I will. Questions? No? I'll show you a happy story. Found one. Lights, please.
Kapag may gustong ikwento yung tao sa barbero, doon yung bagsaka kasi ng mga chismosa. Eh nung mangyari ang bagyo, kaya wala man sila mapagkwentuhan dahil wala mang barbershop. Ngayon na lang may bubong. Ngayon, nagugupit ulit. Ganoon pa rin yung mga kwento na nangyari, kung anong pinagdaanan, ganoon pa rin. Dahil kahit pa paano, kahit mahirap yung kalagayan, papapogi pa man doon yung mga tao. Kahit daw walang bahay, basta pogi, para hindi nadadala ng tungkot. Eh bago yung kuwan, Yolanda, punta na kami sa mga safety lugar. Natakot kami dahil yung hangin malakas, tapos yung mga bubong lahat nagliliparan na. Sabi ko, wala, nakatapusan na siguro ito. Inisip ko, wala, bahala na kung anong mangyari. Nung matapos yung bagyo, nandiyan man lang ako sa harapan. Wala yung unang tinignan ko, yung barbershop, wala na talaga. Pati upuan ko, sira, wala lahat. Pangarap sa buhay, wala na siguro. Pagkakalam ko po dito sa Giwan, maraming namatay, tsaka yung mga nasugatan dahil nung matapos yung bagyo, sa harapan namin may nakikita kami mga taong patay na dinadala papuntang sementeryo, pinapasan. Mga tao dito, pagkatapos ng Yolanda, wala kang makikitang mukha na tumatawa. Pero ngayon na medyo may haligi ng tumatayo, baga okay na rin. Simula na ng buhay ulit. Sabi ko, walang to, babangon ulit. Buhay pa naman. Nung pagkatapos ko ng bagyo, maraming tatanong sa akin kung magugupit na raw ako. Sabi ko, hindi pa, kaya wala pa man tayong maupan, wala tayong masisilungan. Itayo muna daw kuno, kahit mahirap yung kalagayan natin, basta pogi pa rin tayo. Yung mga bagsak na kahoy, inipon, yun ulit yung pinangtayo. Sa ngayon na nakatayo na ako ng kuhan, may bubong na, marami nang nagpapagupit. Ay, hindi nasira yung gunting ko. Dahil bago ng bagyo, pinadala ko kay misis, pinalagay ko sa cellophane para hindi mabasa. Wala nang salamin. Mabuti ka ko lang salamin dahil yung maarte, hindi na makakapagreklamo. Ngayon dahil sa siguro medyo na nakakapagkuhan na, nakakahanap ng konting pera, okay na rin. Ngayon, yung pera may nabibili na rin, gasolina, sa motor, masasakyan, isda, yun lang yung mga pangangailangan. Sa ngayon, yung pangarap ko, yung may tayo ko lang ulit yung bahay ko, makapagpundar ulit ng hanap buhay. Kaya ng Giwan tumayo ulit. Ang mga taga-Giwan po, malalakas yung loob, hindi yan aatras huli nang umangat yung Giwan. Kaya ngayon, hindi nabibitiw yan, tuloy-tuloy pa rin yan. Pag tumigil tayo, patay. Sasabay tayo na Yolanda. Kahit mawala yung bahay namin, mawala yung buwan, basta yung gunting ko, hawak ko pa rin. Buhay pa rin ako.
People will tell you Tacloban is rising. It's not. Late in summer, they're terrible places. It's not hopeful. People are not hopeful. They're defiant. They're fighting back. They know that the worst has happened. They know it might not get better, but they're alive. So we hope by telling our stories, things will change a little bit. I don't think, let me correct that, I don't represent Rappler. I don't think social media will change the world. I don't think a story changes the world. But I think it can make a little bit of difference. And even if it doesn't, at least we tell their stories. We owe them that much. Thank you.
Thank you, Patricia.